Hey everyone. So we're just going to do a little bit of a chat back and forth uh, about people pleasing and about boundaries because I have a workshop coming up and I've done a lot of talking before with Alana. She runs a podcast called Courageously Authentic, and she's usually interviewing me now. I'm kind of like interviewing you. It's kind of different, which is really cool. But I feel like it's really relevant in our world right now where there's a lot of people that are in this people pleasing kind of behavior. And there's kind of a lot of people that are realizing that they're in that and they're really wanting to kind of change and figure out where this all comes from and where it derives from. And I just feel like all of a sudden it seems very, very prevalent,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, talking about what we were talking about last week, Michelle, and you know more of a background than anybody listening, but to give a little backstory for myself, I think like just being a heart-centered, emotional, highly sensitive individual, and previously not having any control over my emotions, whereas my emotions would really guide my decision making. And people pleasing was definitely one of them to keep the peace. It's almost something that you learn how to do to survive in a sense, especially as a child. You just become one to navigate the water just to keep yourself safe and to keep the peace. But anyways, long story short, I started to recognize these behaviors in myself, but most recently, as I peeled back the layers and done the work, the inner work and the healing with people like yourself, um, other things have come into focus that were currently, as you say, in my blind spot. And the process and journey is it's different for everybody. There is no timeline, but if you're choosing to do the work and to go through life with your eyes wide open, certainly as you start, things will come to the surface. And that's something that I'm learning to work through myself right now. You know, it comes as it comes.
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the nose there. That whole like avoidance of conflict bit is not just as a kid, but even as an adult. I can tell you how many times, in the work world when I worked in the corporate world, it was like I'm just going to agree with whatever they say because I don't want to stir the pot or like I don't want to cause conflict or someone's going to be on my case and I don't want to have to deal with that. And it really by doing that to yourself, it's basically shutting down your inner authentic self, right? Like that's part of it. And we think that it's just better if we just do this. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely battles to pick from time to time. But when that's constantly happening and you're constantly like, yeah, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut just in order so I don't cause an argument or I don't stir the pot, it just piles on and it layers and it layers. And when we talk like a lot about like cords, contracts with different people, by doing that to ourselves, we're layering on that all those cords and contracts, and we're basically telling our inner self, like taking our ego aside, that you don't matter and that your opinion doesn't matter.
Exactly. And what I've come to realize, Michelle, I feel like family dynamics are even harder. Um, and essentially what I'm seeing is by allowing this, just because it is a family member, A doesn't make it right, but by allowing it, I'm only condoning the behavior. I'm enabling it for the cycle to repeat itself. And so now that I have all this self-awareness, it's like, man, like I'm not attracting these people into my life anymore, but I'm still learning to navigate the ones that are still lingering and setting a new precedent for that relationship for myself, for my future self, for my family, future children, if they come. Like, it's so much more than just about you, but man, it is wicked hard. And the truth is, I would never allow anyone to speak to me the way this person in particular is speaking to me at this point in my life. I
Yeah.
don't believe through the work that I've done that I would attract someone of that kind into my life now, but I'm still having to deal with this. There's a cycle to be broken here. And it's damn hard.
Yeah, like you talk about family and stuff like that, and that's really hard because you can't pick your family sometimes. Your blood is your blood. And you know I tell people through all the work that I do, through my Zoom room and through my healing center, just that sometimes you do have to have a solid boundary that if you're putting those boundaries up, even though they are your family members, they are your siblings, they are your parents, they are whatever they are, and they can't meet them, sometimes you just have to say no. And you just have to be like, until you can meet me where I'm at, I can't have you in my life. And I know that that seems really harsh. And a lot of people are like, I can't do that. Like, that's impossible. And it's like, nothing is impossible, right? It all kind of works out, and it's not a permanent thing, but until the emotions settle, the each party gets their ego out of play and gets the work that they need to get done and through on their own, there's
Yeah.
no point in partaking in that. And that's like what we don't realize is, by those people behaving that way with you, is that we talk about control dramas. That is a control drama. They are siphoning the energy and that energy field right out of you. And so by not having the boundary is really kind of like hurting yourself, right?
Absolutely. And ultimately, if I'm allowing it, then I'm sending out the signals and energy that that's okay. And
Yeah.
that's not what I want to be putting out into the universe. Because the universe doesn't know the difference between good and bad and right, wrong. If you're saying
Right.
yes and you're allowing it to happen, I mean, they can only respond to what you give them to respond to. And
Yeah.
earlier, this just came back to me, Michelle. You were talking about, it was taking me to women specifically about the stories. So even me now, sometimes I have like, I think I'm asking for what I'm worth. I think that and then you realize that we're still actually undervaluing ourselves, even through all the work. Do you know what I'm saying? And
You're
I
second
think that
guessing.
there's such deeply rooted conditioning beliefs that go back generations. And it's like, but in comparison to, like, just use men and female in the workplace, for example. I think that, oh, I'm worth this much. So in this role, I'm going to ask for this, and I'm going to ask for this, and I'm going to ask for this. But then in comparison, I'm like, but all these men are getting all these different things. And I didn't even realize that I'm still undervaluing myself, even though I think I'm asking what I'm worth. Like, that's how deep some of these stories go.
Yeah, you know what? That brings us into another thing, is like one of the things that I feel like the reason that we get into these little situations is because of the comparison game that we often do. And not to say that there isn't a comparison game, because that is part of our world, but I find that women especially do a lot of comparison to other women, or even, you like you said, like men in the workplace and like what we deserve and all that kind of stuff. And I really feel like that's somewhere around the story. Like, I feel like, you know, we've had the story where, my God, it's flipped. It was like women had no rights, to start off with. We couldn't vote, we couldn't drive, we couldn't, have our own credit card, we couldn't have anything. And then, women began to flip and rise. And then, like, unfortunately, women really demasculated men. And then it kind of flipped around, and there's a lot of men who have come out of that role. And now I think we're kind of doing this whole dance where we're kind of doing the tipsy turvy.
Yeah.
And but I feel like the the dynamic of comparing yourself to someone else is such a harmful thing. I feel like that is because, like, you and I are not the same. Like, we
Yeah.
just are not the same. And so, like, for me to compare myself and go, oh my goodness, look at her skin, it's just so beautiful, I just want to be like, it's just like, why am I doing that to myself? The internal part of me that is like okay with who I am and where I am and what age I'm at and like the way I look and everything like that, that is, it goes right back to one of our podcasts. It's being the unfuckwithable-ness, you know what I mean? Like, it really is. But yeah, like, I feel like women do a lot of what they do because they really need that external validation, and not just women, but people who are doing this, right? But let's talk about where that comes from, right? That need to please, people please, that need to get acceptance and approval outside of yourself so that you feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
like, where did that come from for you?
I think it's definitely shifted. I definitely fill up my own cup significantly more than I ever did even 3 years ago. There's no question about that.
I
That's
will 100% agree with that. Yeah.
thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and people that I've worked with closely over the last 3.5 years, they've acknowledged that and validated that within me, which is awesome. And that's what community is for, because sometimes when we start making the shifts, we don't see it. But being honest and authentic, and the people that are in your community can mirror that back to you. And I just want to highlight that is super important. We talk about sisterhood, coming together in community. It's so important in the healing journey. What was the question again? The internal versus the external validation?
Yeah, like thinking about like where that actually came from, like the need to people please, the need to get external validation, acceptance, approval outside of yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, again, I come back to, I'm a very heart-centered individual. I love to give, but I don't give to get validation. And I think some people give to get validation, and there is a difference. I give it out of my free heart and my free will with no expectations. That's ultimately where it has to come from. I think where we get into hot waters is when we give with expectation that someone's going to give back to us. They don't, we're let down. Like, there's so many layers to this. How do you want to look at it?
Yeah, it's so true because it like, and that's another thing. Like expectations are definitely on the list too, because it's like I was talking to somebody else about this, about when we deliver something to someone, like if we have to, have a very honest and truthful and authentic conversation, and we are doing this not from a place of like evil or malicious intent or anything like that, but we're like, man, I have to say something that is not going to be easy to say. It could possibly cause some conflict, and I really need to share that with you. And as long as we deliver it from our heart, how the other person takes it is out of our control. And so I feel like the expectation of, well, oh, that person didn't handle that very well, they should have handled it this way. It's like, well, maybe, but we don't know what was going on before we sat with them or talked to them about this. We don't know where they are mentally. We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't, and we are meaning making machines, right? So like I say, oh, you know what, Alana, you know what, those glasses make your head look really small or something like that. And you're just like, what the hell? Like
glasses.
like, Michelle, like, what's going on? Like, Michelle doesn't like my glasses. I have to go get some new, you know what I mean? Like, that's not
But
about
see, this
that.
is, yes, and when we're, again, that unfuckableness, so you can tell me that right now, I'm gonna say, well, I love my glasses, so whatever. Like, that's her opinion, but it doesn't shake me. I don't spin out, I don't think about it, I just get on because I'm comfortable and confident in who I am. And I love myself. And I wanted to come back, sorry, Michelle, and I don't mean to cut you off, but what you were saying about the self-worth, it's like, are we attached to it when we give? If our self-worth is attached to whatever it is that we're giving, I think that's where we have to question or call into question for ourselves. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that self-worth, because if I'm going to do this and I need that external validation and I'm doing it seeking that, we need to come back and look at ourselves, because we can't be doing that. That's so harmful.
Yeah, in Landmark, they call that an order to, right? So you're not doing something out of the pureness of just doing it. You're doing it out of well, if I do this, I'll probably get this, or I want to get that. You know what I
Or
mean?
a validation of some kind.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and there's such people out there, and this isn't right or wrong or good or bad, but it's something for us to recognize in ourselves, that there are some people out there that if I said that, your glasses, then they would literally go and get a new pair of glasses just to impress or impress upon me that they want validation from me. Oh, they want me to recognize that you have new glasses. And so that is definitely something that happens a lot. And again, not right or wrong or good or bad, but something that we need to recognize, because how many women do you know who are literally running around every day, their moms, their daughters, their sisters, and they're just running around every day trying to make everybody happy, and they're exhausted. Have you ever been there where you're just like, I'm so tired of thinking of everybody else before me that I'm just done?
In different ways. I'm not a mother and I don't have a partner right now.
Yeah.
And so, but in different ways, I think that that's the natural default that we're running on, especially, women, because I watched my grandmother and my mother before me doing these things, and realizing they both have come to it at much later in life. Um, they found themselves, but for me, it's happening younger and younger.
Yeah.
But I think that default program running is exactly that. Please, 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 who can I help? And I think I got caught up in, there is a difference, again, saying like doing things from a heart-centered place versus doing things for external validation. And sometimes, actually, for a long time, most of my life, there wasn't a difference. It was all just, you know
Mush.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because like you were saying about like watching your grandma and watching your mom and everything like that. And it's like, where does that act like where did that actually originate from? Like
Yeah.
nurture or nature or like what is that? Or both? Like, what's your thought on that?
This is a tricky one, Michelle, because I'm reading, I joined this book club and it's we're reading the Magdalene manuscripts, what's it called? Sex Magic of Isis. And it gets into religion, um, and how there was suppression happening, um, minimizing the feminine to bow down to the masculine, because it wasn't always like this. Like you said, there was a shift from the feminine to the masculine, and now there's a correction happening. But we got to be careful that we don't
Yeah.
do a full 180, right? And go back. We need both.
Yeah.
Um, and so, to your question, where does that come from? Power, people wanting to be in control.
True.
And this goes back over 2,000 years ago, based on the book that I'm reading. I'm not a history buff, so don't quote me on this. But based on that, there was a shift, and it come down to power and control. And then from that, you have these social constructs that were formed. And then
Absolutely.
over thousands of years, here we are today battling with it, trying to find a balance.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna definitely look up that book. That's right up my alley.
Fantastic book. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. We in the membership that I run, we did a we started following the Sophia codes, and the tribe, and Isis is in that tribe as well, and it is definitely very feminine and very like sexual driven and so forth, and like I can definitely see where that would come from. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say like, is it possible that it's a bit of both? I mean, if you think about it, if you grew up watching your brother, sister, your mom, your dad, like going around and constantly wanting validation from everybody else and doing the people pleasing, even parents sometimes today, you know, are so trying to please their kids, right? Like I have this observation of like a lot of my friends who are single moms and like are separated or divorced or whatever, they're there's a certain guilt that they carry about the fact that they have like no longer a solid family unit per se at this moment in time, and they give in and they completely flatten their boundaries to the young kids. Sometimes it's through money, sometimes it's through events and doing things and like all that kind of stuff, but like I kind of like think that there's a bit of a balance of it's learned in what we've learned from our upbringing and watching who we watched in our, our impressionable years. But I also like can't help but think of that book and thinking that if that has been how we've been brought up generation after generation after generation, that women are small and that we need to keep quiet, or, you know, um, soul being reborn and into life after life after life and never actually healing the wound of feeling like you matter and that you're important and that you're valued. How does that play a role, right?
Well, Michelle, this is so interesting. I love this conversation. Okay, so coming back to your friends who have maybe gone through divorce, and the guilt. So this is where I'm in a really interesting position because I'm not married. I don't have children. I started to do the work. And so new precedences are going to be set here. I've done things very differently than, my mother, my sister, my grandmother, my great grandmother. All of them were married, pregnant in their late teens. I was the first one to go to university, so I am able to, let's say I start a family in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going into it with all this behind me. Whereas my mother, grandmother, sister even, they started it, but they didn't know themselves yet. Right?
Yeah.
So like things are changing, and I'm seeing this more and more with people in their young 20s, or sorry, their late 20s, early 30s. They're doing this stuff before they're getting into that. So how that's going to shake out and look in the world, a few decades from now, I think it's going to be a very different world.
Absolutely. I think so too. I mean, there was no time to look into those things. I mean, like even like I'm a little older than you. Like I really didn't know who the heck I was until I was in my mid 30s. I was like, okay, I'm somebody's wife, I'm somebody's daughter. This is what's expected of me. Hey,
Yeah,
like there was more value in external validation than there was with my own opinion of myself.
yeah,
And so yeah, I do think we're coming into a very different world because you coming into a new relationship, a marriage, bringing a child, another soul into this world is going to look a lot different than our parents. And I do believe that people like you and I are here to lighten the load for our families, to clean up that ancestral loops that are going on, right? And
yeah. Help
how
my skills in my body. It's so that's truth for me, Michelle. It's truth for me. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And like I really feel like we really need to get clear on what boundaries really are and what
yeah,
they look like and like because there's a fine balance here. You can have like really solid boundaries and have too solid of boundaries that you're keeping yourself boxed in and therefore you're not willing to receive new things that are coming in, or you
yeah.
could have no boundaries at all and then be exposed to everything and anything. So it's this tipping toe of being a Libra, the great scales of life.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great point though, and that's new to me. Like this whole boundary setting, like I didn't know what that was 3 years ago, and now I'm starting to implement it into my life. But like it is through trial and error, because you are right. We don't want to get so boundaried that we actually miss out and
Yeah.
that we stop receiving to keep us safe, because essentially we're just repeating the same cycle in a different way.
And that's exactly it. Like, I feel like I swing pretty hard on the pendulum when I first started with boundaries, I was like, nope, nope, nope. I'm saying no to everything. And then everyone's like, and I'm like,
You get
okay,
carried away.
yeah,
Yeah,
but then I'm also like, I'm limiting myself on what I can receive and the people I'm going to meet and what's going to happen. And then, like, I don't think I've ever gone the other way as of yet. I mean, I was the other way where I didn't have any boundaries and I said yes to everything and everybody else was way more important than I was. But yeah, I'm more balanced now than I've ever been in my entire life. This has been 42 years of a struggle of being a Libra and trying to balance things off. And I think that I'm really looking forward to I'm doing a master class on boundaries and about boundaries for us, boundaries for our soul, boundaries and how they all connect to the validation of ourself, how they connect with us being truly authentic with ourselves and
yeah,
really who we are, and getting like jumping off the train, not being stuck on this train that's constantly going in a loop, and just being able to go, okay, I'm done. I'm important. Like I can't help but remember, what the heck is that movie called? And it was a just little cute little blonde girl, and she was being cared for by her nanny, and the nanny was like, just remember you matter and you're important, and I,
oh,
yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I
I
sent the
know
clip.
what you're talking about. I know what
Yeah,
you're talking about. Geez,
yeah,
that's a good movie.
it's
I'll
such a
find that
good
it might
movie.
be. I'll Google it later.
But I used to say that to my niece. I'd be like, listen, you know what, like because I mean she's an only kid too, and I feel like I know you're not an only kid, but I feel like growing up, like being an only kid, it was like being around adults all the time. I was just like, I'm just going to agree with whatever they say because I just don't know what to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just it. Like we aren't taught, like a lot of the things that I've learned, in my mid to late 20s now, like I had no awareness of. it just wasn't, you know what, and there are some out there that are fortunate enough to have people guiding them, talking about truth testing, you know, what is your body telling you? What does that feel like? What does it feel like when you feel anxious, uncomfortable, stressed? Start asking those questions, you know, that these are all new things that I've developed now, and man, I'm grateful. But yeah, they're just not taught.
No,
Not,
no,
so
and they're
that's
not.
changing too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't taught that either. That was all like upcoming in my spiritual awakening for sure. But yeah, to really be able to feel in your body when something is not right for you or something's off or somebody's not the right person to be trusting or hanging around with. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. That's part of a boundary, right? But okay, well, I really appreciate your time today. So I don't know if you're planning on attending or not, but it's being held on June 27th. June 27th? Is that, yes, that's when it is. June 27th. I'm like, what day is it?
Yeah.
um at 7, I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's free. So anybody who wants to attend, come on in and attend. And if any of this spoke to you, then just come and have a listen, because I'm sure you're going to meet a ton of other people who have been through the same kind of situations. And we have a ton to learn from each other. I mean, I've learned so much watching you kind of do your thing over the past 3.5 years. I mean, you were this quiet neighbor and now you're this outspoken woman. I love it.
Yes, yes, I am. And vice versa, you know. I know we've had a couple conversations recorded and put on the podcast, but truly, like, it is a pleasure to walk alongside other women and men, you know, and children too, that are choosing this path for themselves. And honestly, through conversation, that was the starting point. And this master class is just another tool to like take advantage of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. That sounds great. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Michelle.